Namaste. Jai Shiva. Today we are going to talk about the center of consciousness. When and how it should be shifted, where it should be most of the time, where it should be kept most of the time, and how it impacts your journey of life in one way or the other. And this question has been asked by one of the seeker, that what about the placement of consciousness, where it should be when we are doing this or doing that, and when we are living life. So, and what happens if it results into keeping the consciousness at this place versus that place, or keeping it centralized in this way or that way. In other words, they are asking where the focus or attention should be, but those are too gross in nature, too much material in nature. So let's keep the focus on consciousness for now, okay? Where and how it should be. So most of the people around the world that you see can be divided into two different categories. The first ones are those where their consciousness is in the physical body. 99% of the time it's in the physical body. That's their center of consciousness. That's their center of living, you can say, in other words. So when somebody's consciousness is in the body, then you can say that is their reference point to understand anything and everything in life. Okay? If you are trying to tell them something about the wisdom or something, ultimately they will end up thinking how this will impact their body. What will this do to their physical body? And that's what their concern is most of the time. And if the center of consciousness is your physical body, then you are very much driven by the physical urges, biological requirements. Okay? In other words, we are saying that most crucial, most important physical urge is the desire to multiply, the desire to reproduce, the requirement of reproduction. That is the most compulsive one, or you can say in other words, it's the one which you cannot fight against. Okay? You may be able to fight against your urge of hunger for food or your thirst. You can still make compromises in that. You can change that, delay that, do this, do that. But this, you can say that, no, I am able to control my sexual urges, and you may be able to control it only because you have taken that urge to your mind. So we'll talk about those urges later on. For now, the center of consciousness is your physical body. So those who have here, I'm not talking about those who take the physical urges to the mental plane and start playing with them there. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that people, those whose center of consciousness is their physical body. Okay? Now, these kind of people are just physical compulsiveness driven, or very much excessively health driven, you can say. Everything, they go nuts about, freak about all kinds of physical health, and physical health. Going to gym, making body in this way or that way. This kind of urge is also there in people who, when they're this kind, or in other words, you can say when this center of consciousness is the body, that is also the time when you are very conscious about how you look. What are you wearing when you are going to this place or that place, and you want to look your best at all times, no matter what. No picture on social media, such people will post where they have gray hairs or, shabby looking clothes or this way or that way, in one way or the other. Body and looks and everything related to physical body matters a lot to them. Okay, so these are the kind of people who end up either they go on the very healthy side, or you can say they go on the side of, in the extremes, they go on the side of the path where it's no matter what, they are driven by their physical urges. It could be sexual urge, it could be about sleep, it could be about that urge maybe for food, then eating this type of food. These kind of people will create a lot of sanskaras, chitvrittis, or psychological patterns that are related to the body. Okay? So I would like to eat this, not that. I want to eat this food, not that. I want to do this, not that. I want to look like this, not look like that. Now I am hungry. Now I am sleepy. Now I'm thirsty. Now I'm having a sexual arousal. All those kind of things will happen. Whatever is happening in your body is where your consciousness is most of the time. And then their ideas of entertainment, their ideas of spending time wisely would be body related. Okay, it could be in a good way, it could be in a bad way, doesn't matter. But all their ideas roam around, all their theories, all their understanding, all their wisdom is roaming around physical body only. Because their consciousness is very much body centered. Now comes the next level of people. Next type of people, category of people. Let's not call that a level actually. And I'll explain why I'm saying that in a minute. But let's say another category of people where the conscious center of consciousness is chitta. Chitta means, you can call it roughly mind. Okay. But chitta is also the warehouse of all kinds of psychological patterns, or the chitta vrittis that we call, and the sanskaras that we call, the seeds of those psychological patterns, seeds of chitta vrittis. So they exist in your chitta. And chitta, or you can say, when you call it mind, then you also include the ego, or you can say that it also includes all the sensory points in your body, all kinds of sensory experiences in your body, the faculty of sensory experiences, which we call as manas. So it's there. Okay. But let's call it chitta, because I'll explain in a minute why that is the best possible explanation of center of consciousness. Being driven by your chitta means you have chitta vrittis in your chitta. Chitta vrittis are those hardened psychological patterns for fear, resistance to change, for attachments, for aversions, and spiritual ignorance. So, and identities, ton of identities, and social images, which are the reflection of those identities that you have created in the first place. So that means a lot of feelings will arise. If all these psychological patterns exist in a person, and their consciousness is very much chitta driven, or in other words, you call them, a consciousness is feelings driven. Their consciousness always stays in their feelings. So they may be feeling one way or the other. Everything for them is about feelings. It's not about body either. Something may be good for the body, but because the center of consciousness lies in their chitta, and that too into the very muddy and disturbed part of the chitta, which we call as the layer of feelings, the surface of emotions. That is where chitta is very deep. So on the surface, all you see is nothing but emotions, excessive emotions and disturbed kind of emotions. There are no good emotions, right? And that which comes from your heart, because of your intellect and your power of discernment, there is no emotion that exists which can be called as, okay, this is a good emotion. Forget about those theories about positive emotion, negative emotion. All that theories are actually nothing but just theories. The moment you are breathing, living consciously, from your intellect and from your power of discernment, then those feelings and those things, though that is the only time you feel like I am having some sort of a positive emotion, or otherwise there's no such thing as positive emotion or negative emotion. All emotions are nothing but just emotions. Okay? And they are the result of the patterns that you have. And based off of those patterns, the kind of psychological patterns, the kind of karma that you have done, which has given you some life situations, either good, either bad, where you feel good or feel bad, all those kind of emotions have created. Emotions are also arising from the memories that you have got. Okay? The memories that you harbor. So the root cause of your memories, painful memories, good memories, whatever. So all kinds of memories that you have, if you have a memory, then that means the cause of that memory, and if that memory brings back either the feeling of something feeling nice or good about, or feeling really dreadful or, emotionally painful kind of memory, whatever kind of memory it is. If there is a memory, then that means that memory has happened because you have a spiritual ignorance within you. That is one of the psychological pattern, topmost psychological pattern, from where the identities arise. From the identities, attachments arise and aversions arise. And from when you have attachments and aversions, I don't want to lose it. So then you are fearful. So all the way it keeps on devolution. It goes on devolution. It devolutes, and finally it becomes the fear in you, or resistance to change, because you do not want to lose what you have. It may be a known devil, but you do not want to get away from it in search of some unknown. And the unknown may be good, may be bad. So you see, center of consciousness is on the top for many people, second category of people that I am talking about. And that center of consciousness is on the surface of emotions. So for them, everything is emotion. They understand the language of emotion. Something may be very good for them, but just because it doesn't feel good, feel right, they're not going to do it. They cannot follow it. No matter how much wisdom you try to give these people, they are always their parameter to know what is right, what is wrong, is their feeling, which is the worst parameter to judge or criticize your own actions, to know what you are doing is wrong, or whether it is right or wrong, or to take some decision in life. Decisions in life shouldn't be based on nor the body, not just the body. And decisions in life, big decisions in life, should also not be taken from the surface of emotions, that muddy water in your chitta. It shouldn't be from that center either. Right? So these are the kind of people to whom you try to give wisdom or anything, they may immediately get offensive and they will turn defensive. So offense, defense, useless, not accepting the wisdom or understanding the wisdom that is there. So both of these centers are horrible in nature. Keeping your focus or consciousness centered to the physical body is bad, and keeping your focus or center of consciousness into your emotional plane, emotional dimension of your chitta is equally bad. A lot of people, out of sexual urge or the physical centered consciousness, will go and commit crime. Their idea of getting insulted or offended is through their body. So if you challenge their body, their looks, their identities are tied to the physical body, they'll get offended and they may commit the crime. They may do wrong. They may go into that kind of an extreme. Okay? And they may completely discard what is happening to them psychologically. People, those who are stuck at the emotional plane, emotional dimension of your chitta, or in other words, disturbances of that your chitta vrittis and sanskaras, the seeds of chittavrittis that are creating, that emotionally disturbed plane, if you stay stuck there, it's equally bad. Again, you are not grasping the wisdom. It's all about feeling this way or feeling that way. And if you are feeling very fearful and the greed is arising into you, then that is how corruption happens in the society. A lot of greedy people, and that greed could be for the power, that greed could be for the resources, that greed could be for the money, that greed could be being obsessive about somebody else and on the name of love. That greed could be getting lot of benefits on the name of marriage, and then no matter how bad your relationship in your marriage with your spouse is, you're still staying stuck into that marriage because there are benefits that you are fearful to lose. Because there is a social identity attached to it that you are fearful of breaking, right? So it is equally bad. So body-centered consciousness or the placement of consciousness in your physical body means, in other words, we also call that as identification with the body. Now, identification with your emotions and thoughts. That is another center of consciousness. So you can say you are being emotion-centered, and people call that heart-center. It's not heart-center. We're being very emotional. I created one of the video in Hindi as well, and I have talked on many occasions about how emotions are not, heart is not the center. Sorry. The purity of heart, the center of heart, or in other words, heart chakra, or in other words, anahata chakra, is all about intellect. That intellect could be pure or it could be impure. That power of discernment that you have got is according to the purity of the intellect that you have got. Something may feel right to you, but may not be actually right. And you may not end up doing that because your power of intellect says, no, this should not be done. It's wrong at so many levels, in so many ways. It'll harm others. Or it'll harm me in this way or that way. If not now, then in future. It's true for greed, it's true for fear, it's true for any kind of emotion that you may come up with. So in both cases, if you are identified with your emotions, feelings, chittavrittis, identities, right? If you are, in other words, if you have a chitta-centered consciousness, or if you have a body-centered consciousness, then in both cases, you are clouding your intellect. You are covering your intellect. In other words, you are ignoring your intellect. You are jeopardizing your power of discernment. So then what should be the center of consciousness at all times? If not body, if not emotion or chitta, then where should be the center of consciousness should be? Where should we place it? That's the question. Where should we place it? So there is no one line answer to this. Where should you place it? If you are eating food, your center of consciousness should be in the body. You should place your consciousness into the body. Eat the food, relish it. Let all your taste bud come alive. Get into the depth of each and every flavor that is there in the food. So your consciousness has to come to the body. If you are loving somebody or having an intercourse with your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your lover or wife or husband or whatsoever, if you are doing that, then also your consciousness needs to come to the body. Otherwise, if there is a pain or a disease or a sickness in the physical disease or some sickness going on in the body, then whether you want it or not, your consciousness will come back to the body. Even if you don't want it, and if you have a headache going on, or migraine pain, or some other physical disease or thing is going on, then definitely, no matter what, your consciousness will forcefully, it has to be in the body. Because there is a pain, because there is a sickness, because there is this or there is that, right? And so this is how it's about body. So if you are doing workout, or if you are physically working, then your consciousness needs to be in the body. Otherwise, you will drop the barbell on yourself while doing bench press, right? If you are in the gym, or you may pick up more weight than you should, or your posture may be wrong while doing a particular exercise or working out in the gym, or playing any sports or anything, and may harm your body. And if you are physically working, then you may lift the weight in a wrong manner, and you may hurt your back. You may pull your sciatica, or something else bad may happen. If you are not eating the food and not having the consciousness in the body, then at that time, it's like you will not know what you have eaten, whether it was right or wrong, good or bad for your health actually. And that's what we call as mindless eating, where actually the center of consciousness is in your feelings. You may be feeling bad or feeling stressed, feeling tensed, or thinking this or thinking that. Your consciousness may be in your feelings and the thoughts that is arising because of those feelings. So your center of consciousness may be that, but you are actually eating right now. You may be doing physical work. You may be having sex with your partner, or you may be doing some physical workout or something like that, or you may be riding a bike or whatever it is, right? That's what we call as mindless activity, mindless physical activity. It includes eating food without bringing your consciousness back to the body. And with men, it's easier for men to understand this thing, that because the woman's body is such that there is no signal. There's no physical sign that happens. It does in a subtle way, but still it can be overlooked. A lot of people just overlook it. That when females' center of consciousness stays in the mind, in the emotions, in the thoughts and whatever it may be, and they are having an intercourse, they may be dry. Their vaginal secretion may not be up to the mark, but it is less recognizable in comparison to when it happens with men. They may suddenly lose the erection. And that's an easy way to see that, okay, you started thinking something from your mind, you lost your body, your consciousness is not in the body, your erection is gone. Or even the sexual arousal is not happening to you, physical arousal is not happening to you, because your consciousness is so much centered into the mind. And I'm not saying whether it's for good reason you are centered there, or bad reason, or you are stuck into your emotions, or you are stuck into your thoughts, or you may actually be a scientist and doing something, or you may be a doctor and thinking about the next surgery that you have got to do. You may be an army person, or you may be something critical analytics you might be doing. So it's all about whether you are in your mind or in your body. It's easier to see that. It's easier to know that during the sexual intercourse in terms of men. For men, in comparison to the woman, it's not that easy. The woman may just fake an orgasm, doesn't matter, because she was in her mind. It's harder for anybody. Now, this is one thing that is true for men and women in terms of this one activity. But in general, people like to generalize it that men have their body-centered consciousness and females or women usually have feelings-centered consciousness. Now, this may be true to some extent. I do not want to generalize here. I'm saying a lot of people generalize it like that. The reason I do not want to do this is because I have seen a lot of men, more men in my life of this 47 years of life, I've seen more men being stuck in their feelings, emotions. Very much emotion driven men. And then they suffer from all kinds of psychosomatic problems, physical diseases, psychosomatic physical problems. No matter what kind of wisdom you are trying to give them, they'll either feel offended and start defending immediately, or they may feel like as if you are blaming them. They'll take any piece of wisdom or anything, any advice or anything else, just either a blame or a something that they need to defend, and their social image, their image that they have created, it'll get offended. And most of the time they are in their bad feelings. So in the way I would like to generalize is that the world is changing. The generations are changing. And instead of having more and more body-centered consciousness, the number of people having mind-centered, or you can say emotion-centered consciousness, is on the high rise. And you can clearly see that in last few years, last few decades actually, we haven't found any new organ in your body. No new disease in your physical body. Right? There may be different solutions to the existing problems or sickness or diseases that exist. But there are no new diseases as such. What virus can do, what bacteria can do, and to what extent it can do, that could be a solution for that, could be a new discovery. But otherwise, what problems can happen in your physical body and what may happen, the solutions vary, but the problem is still the same since last few decades. But every now and then, in every decade, if you see, there is a new psychological disease that has come up. Psychological problem is on the rise. And this COVID period of 2020 and 2021 has taught the entire world how much mentally sick we all are. Right? What can drive you crazy? If you are forced to live inside the house with the other person or just by yourself. What all psychological patterns have you got? How hardened they are? How difficult it is to let go? All that you have known it in last 2 years. All of you have known it in the last 2 years. In a much more stark, naked, strong way, right? So you see how the diseases, psychosomatic diseases, or you can call them psychological diseases, or you can call them psychological issues or psychiatric issues. So all those things are on the rise because more and more people are living in their feelings part, living in their mind, in other words. Mind and emotions, mental and emotional body. That has become the center of consciousness for a lot of people. Now, whether you live here or you live here, as I said, your intellect is clouded. So then where the consciousness should be placed, right? That is what we were discussing. If you are doing something physical, consciousness should be in the body. That should be the center of consciousness at that time, at that moment. If you are doing a critical thinking or analysis, you are looking at data and you are a software engineer or you are doctor or you are army person or something and you are doing some sort of an analysis, some kind of work that requires planning, analyzing, critical thinking, and coming up with hypothesis, theories, this, that, then you should be using your brain. Your consciousness should be placed in your mind. But at that time, when I say that, your consciousness is still not, I am not saying place it into the emotional center of your mind or place it into the chitta where the emotional surface is. Do not place it there. In other words, do not place it in chitta. Always keep it placed in your intellect. Always. You are always putting it in your intellect and using your power of discernment. The only time you will keep it in your, or put it or center it in your emotional plane is when somebody needs your kindness, karuna, daya, So being kind to others, being caring to others in so many ways, physically caring, mentally, emotionally caring, for financial caring, for any kind of caring that somebody may need. That time your center of consciousness is into your emotional feelings or anything. Otherwise, when we say that consciousness is into the emotional plane, into the chitta, that is also termed as loss of consciousness. Why do we term it as loss of consciousness? Because your consciousness is not placed in your intellect. Instead, chitta vrittis are driving it. Instead, chitta vrittis are creating emotions and those emotions are driving it. You are being driven by that. If consciousness is your vehicle, is your driver, then driver must sit on the driving seat. Your intellect is the driving seat. Your power of discernment is the driving seat. But you put that driver, the driver is pulled, you can say, into the body when bodily urges, compulsive urges happens to your body. If it is happening naturally from time to time for the food, for this, for that, that is fine. Still, while eating food, you need your intellect to know, or power of discernment to know whether you are eating the right thing for yourself or you are harming yourself by eating one way or the other, or by eating one thing over the other. Right? Driving seat. Driver should not leave the driving seat. So sometimes it is pulled over by the physical urges, and then we call it a law. And if you end up doing something which is visible to other people that you physically did the wrong thing, then we say, okay, you are, you're conscious, you're not conscious. You are being driven by your physical nature. You are very much body bound. Your consciousness is bound by the body, or by, being covered by the bodily compulsiveness, physical compulsiveness. And that equates to loss of consciousness. We don't call that, we call that mindless activity, or we call that, oh, you are unconscious right now. You don't know what you are doing physically. Exactly same thing happens with mind. When you are being driven by spiritual ignorance, identities, aversions, attachments, and fears, and resistance to change, when all that is happening within you, then also we call that, oh, you lost your consciousness. Every time we say you lost your consciousness, you are being driven by the chitta vrittis, the psychological patterns that you have got. When we say that, we are saying consciousness should be sitting at the seat of intellect, at the seat of power of discernment that arises from the intellect. It should be sitting there, it's not there. What has covered it? Where has it gone? It has gone into the mental emotional plane of feeling this way, feeling that way. So, in other words, what I am saying is mental compulsiveness that arises because of these psychological patterns, and physical compulsiveness will hijack your driver, will hijack your consciousness in one way or the other. If it keeps on hijacking for a long time, car is still running. Then never forget that. This life is always, you're always moving towards death in one way or the other. And very quickly. Quickly than the way you realize it. Faster than you realize it. You're going there, towards your death. Your body cells are dying on everyday basis. Your memory cells, your brain cells are dying every day. Your body is changing, aging. So you're dying. So car is still this whole thing is a car, is a vehicle. And it just keeps on going. Whether you put the driver on the driving seat, or your driver has been hijacked to the mental emotional plane or physical plane. These are the only two planes for you where it can be hijacked. And that physical also involves all kinds of etheric body and energy body stuff. Some people have a very hijacked consciousness. Oh, I'm feeling this way, I'm seeing this light, and something is just going up, and energy is going down in me and going up in me, and I'm feeling vibration on top of my head, on the bottom of my feet, and I'm feeling vibration on my left, on my right, and this way and that way, and my whole body is going this way or that way. They are always talking and understanding, because they're still the physical body and the energy body, etheric body, are so much tightly coupled with each other that we call it physical plane only. But etheric body is also gross or physical in comparison to your mental body. It's still mental body, emotional body is still physical in comparison to the even subtler thing that is consciousness in you, that who you are. It's a major characteristic of you being the self is nothing but the consciousness. So when we say consciousness is not on the intellect or power of discernment, not on the driving seat, then, and it has been hijacked, then in other words, we are saying you are not there on the driving seat or the intellect and power of discernment. Right? You are not there. Then who's driving your car? No, it's on autopilot. Who's running the life? Why don't you remember all the experiences that you have? Because while you were experiencing something, you were not there. Your consciousness was, you as a consciousness, or you the self was not there to exert the consciousness wherever it has to be exerted mindfully. From your intellect. Now, is it enough to have the center of consciousness in your buddhi or your intellect? Is it enough? And power of discernment. Is it enough to live life? No, it's not. If your buddhi is full of tamas, or you can say, then it's going to come up with ideas that perpetuate laziness, inertia. Your power of discernment will always be weighted towards, or it will fall towards greed, ideas that satisfy the greed, ideas that satisfy the strong attachment or passion or obsession, those kind of things. So consciousness can still be placed at your intellect, and it may seem like very difficult thing to do, but it's not. So a driver can still be there on the driving seat. But then it matters how good of a driver you are, right? If we can make sure that driver is always there on the driving seat, then you may still go and wreck the car into the ditch. You may still cause a real bad accident because you do not know how to drive. Because your buddhi, your intellect is not pure enough. That purity comes from, and it's not some kind of a moral thing, purity of intellect. It's not that you are being very moral according to the social codes that are there in the culture, in the country you are living, because it could be exactly opposite. So then whose morality are we talking about? Right? So when we talk about impurities or the purity, when we talk about purity of intellect, purity of consciousness, in other words, purity of who you are, the self, to whom that consciousness belongs to. We are talking about purity of that entity. Then, in other words, we are saying you need to have wisdom of life, wisdom of universe. All that is truth. All that is truth. You need to be able to discern between that which is impermanent and that which is eternal. Body may look like an eternal thing to you, but it's not. A person in the body may look like the same person. Year after year, month after month, year after year, decade after decade. It may look like the same person, but he or she is not the same person. You cannot label anybody. You cannot go on judging on just one parameter just because somebody was bad to you one day and you end up saying that for next rest of your life that he was bad, he's a bad person. No. So you see, the purity of that intellect, purity of power of discernment. So that is the next step. First step is learning to center your consciousness on intellect and power of discernment. But then, if you are able to do that, then your next step is to go on purifying your intellect through the wisdom of truth, wisdom of all that exists, wisdom of all that is, wisdom of life, you can say. These are just different words of saying, okay, just know the truth, period. So make sure you understand in any given moment, if driver is on the driving seat, or he has shifted himself to the passenger seat and yet trying to drive the car, or he has moved on the back seat and trying to drive are you back seat driver? Are you a passenger seat driver? Or are you actually on the driving seat? Any wisdom can actually be imparted to those who at least assume their seat. Those who at least try to sit on their seat. Only then. Only when you are on your seat, the question arises. Where am I going in life? What am I doing? Why am I doing that I am doing? These questions arise only when you are on your seat. And what is the best possible way to reach there without causing an accident? What is the best possible way to safely arrive at your destination? All these questions you can ask. And what's the roadmap? How to go? How do I go there? All these questions will only arise when your center of consciousness is your buddhi, your intellect, and your power of discernment. Only then these questions can be arise. Only in that state somebody can give you a wisdom that you can apply in your life. If anybody tries to give you a wisdom, when your driver has been hijacked, the center of your consciousness is actually your physical body or your feelings. If that has happened and somebody is trying to give you a wisdom, nothing is happening. Driver is not on the seat. Just do not tell them where to go, what to do, how to go about it. Why? Right now they are so consumed by this emotional plane, or they are so consumed by their physical body, they're not going to listen. They're not there actually. Whom are you talking to? Why are you talking to somebody? You keep on knocking the door. Hello, hello, knock, knock. Is anybody there? No, nobody's there. Okay. So this is how the center of consciousness keeps changing, where it should be, how it should be kept. And when we say introspecting yourself, that can only happen when your center of your consciousness is your intellect and your power of discernment. You cannot do any kind of critical thinking and analysis or the introspection or reflection that you try to do. These processes or the witnessing, none of these processes will happen till the time center of your consciousness is your chitta vrittis, your mental emotional plane, or the center of your consciousness is your physical body. And here I am talking about the compulsiveness, not the need-based thing. There may be a need to genuinely think or plan or do something. So then go ahead, fine. Your consciousness ideally should be thinking, and you should be thinking and planning and doing. That's the right thing. And that again means your consciousness is actually at the buddhi, at the intellect, because you know where the consciousness should go right now. If you keep your consciousness or the driver on the driving seat, then this question does not arise. Where should I place my attention while doing this? Where should I place my attention while doing that? This question is being asked only and only because you are not at the center. You are not sitting on the driving seat right now. Only the passenger seat person may ask those questions. Where am I going by sitting here today and now? Where are we going? How do we go about it? Somebody who sits on the driver's seat, they know. And if they do not know, they make sure they know it one way by asking somebody who knows. So then those questions do not arise. Where should I place my attention or my focus while doing this, while doing pranayama, while doing asana, while doing my office work, or while doing, how can I, a lot of people ask the question, how can I keep my focus on my breath when I'm writing an email? Well, if you're writing an email, just write the damn email. What is that? And then they think that if I keep writing email or keep doing my computer work or this work or that work or cooking and this and that, then when do I have time to place my consciousness to something else or somebody else? No, you'll have enough time. You'll have enough time. Just a few microseconds of reflection, true reflection, introspection. If whole day your consciousness was centered on buddhi, on intellect and power of discernment and the purity, in understanding the ignorance within yourself, you'll walk your spiritual journey. That is what is meant by, that is what, all these things, this is also a way of saying, be conscious. Live consciously. Okay, I live consciously. Where do I place, what should be the center of my consciousness? What should be the seat of my consciousness? Well, driving seat. What is the driving seat in human beings? Intellect and power of discernment. And if you find any ignorance in your intellect, then replacing it with the correct wisdom is what the job of intellect is what the job of power of discernment is. Okay, so hope this explains how the center of consciousness keeps on changing, and we say you are identified with your mind, with your emotions, with your thoughts. We say you are identified with your body, all those things. You are identified with your ego, your social images. All these things are just another way of saying your consciousness has been hijacked by either your center of consciousness is your mind in one moment, and then body, and then something else. So these are just different way of explaining the same thing. Okay. Namaste. Jai Shiva.